February is usually a dry spell for Netflix, but to my surprise, they've tucked away some absolute bangers in the sci-fi section this month. I'm just a regular fella from the video store era who prefers movies that actually respect your intelligence. We're talking about Cyberpunk, that gritty, high-tech, low-life vibe that usually gets buried under mid-tier content. I've vetted these for the region to ensure they have at least 30 days of shelf life. These are 10 movies I've actually sat through. Number 10, Archive 2020. Starting with an overlooked masterpiece that I've been itching to tell you about for months, we have Archive from 2020. If you've liked movies like Ex Machina or the more cerebral episodes of Black Mirror, you've got to make Archive the first thing you watch off this list. It's directed by Gavin Rothery, who was actually the concept designer on Duncan Jones's Moon. If you know that movie, you know exactly what kind of visual DNA we're dealing with here. It's clinical, it's lonely, and it feels incredibly lived in. The story follows a guy named George Almore, played by Theo James, in easily his most intense and internal performance. He's holed up in a remote, snowy research facility in Japan, working for a massive corporation to develop a true AI. But George has a secret agenda that his bosses don't know about. He's trying to upload his dead wife's consciousness into a third-generation droid. I'll warn you right now, this is a slow burn. It doesn't round off the edges, and it doesn't hold your hand. If you need a shootout or a massive explosion every 10 minutes to stay engaged, this movie is probably going to bore you to tears. But for those of you who appreciate deep world building and a sense of growing dread, my goodness, the payoff in the final 10 minutes is dynamite. What really blew me away here were the practical effects. The droids George is building J1, J2, and J3 aren't just cheap computer-generated imagery models that look like they were rendered on a laptop. Rothery used his design background to create actual physical suits that an actor could inhabit. J2, specifically, has this clunky, older tech feel that reminds me of the original RoboCop or even the power loader from Aliens. It feels real because it is real. You see the way the older J2 model reacts with this almost human jealousy when George focuses all his attention on the newer, sleeker J3 model? And it's heartbreaking in a way that computer-generated imagery just can't replicate. It's a movie about grief as much as it is about technology, and it hits hard. Now, if that isolated lab setup is a bit too clinical for you, and you want a much more grounded, blue-collar take on the genre, my next pick is an absolute banger that treats superpowers like a curse rather than a gift. Number 9, Code 8, 2019. I'm talking about Code 8 from 2019. This is a fascinating case of the little engine that could in the film world. This actually started as a short film on YouTube by the Amell brothers, Robbie and Steven, and was crowdfunded by fans because everyone was tired of the glossy, hero worship version of sci-fi we usually get from big studios. It takes place in Lincoln City, a place where 4% of the population is born with supernatural abilities. But instead of being invited to join the Avengers, these people are marginalized, live in poverty, and are hunted by autonomous robotic police drones called Guardians. I'll be honest with you, the core heist plot is a little bit boilerplate. You've seen this one last job to save a family member story a dozen times before. But the world building? That's where the meat on the bone is in Code 8. The way they integrate high-tech surveillance into a low-income city like drones, scanning people for illegal power use, while they're just trying to find day labor, feels terrifyingly plausible in 2020 26. They shot this in Toronto on a fraction of the budget of a typical Marvel movie, and yet the robotic guardians look more intimidating and present than anything I've seen in a blockbuster lately. That's because the cinematography stays low, handheld, and gritty. It makes the technology feel like a permanent, oppressive part of the environment. It's a street-level cyberpunk movie that doesn't care about saving the world, it only cares about these characters trying to survive another day in a system that wants them gone. I could say the same thing about the tech as a burden theme in my next pick, but instead of being out in the streets of a city, we're trapped in a high-tech medical pod that's literally running out of time. Number 8, Oxygen, 2021. Oxygen or Oxygène, since it's a French production, is directed by Alexandre Aja. Now, Alexandre Aja is a name horror fans know well from movies like Crawl or that brutal Hills Have Eyes remake from years ago. He knows exactly how to squeeze tension out of a single room, and in this case, that room is a cryogenic unit the size of a coffin. A woman wakes up inside this pod with zero memory of how she got there or even what her own name is. Her only companion is a computer AI named Milo. The catch here is that the pod is damaged, and she's losing oxygen at a rate that gives her about 90 minutes to live. Yes, it's a French movie, which means you're going to be reading subtitles for an hour and 40 minutes. I know some of you find that annoying, But don't be lazy and skip this one because of the language barrier. If you do, you're missing out on one of the most near-perfect thrillers currently on Netflix. The movie was actually filmed during the height of the pandemic, which is probably why it feels so genuinely isolated and panicked. Melanie Laurent's performance is a masterclass in acting. She's working with nothing but her eyes and her voice for 90% of the runtime. It's a ticking clock thriller that uses the AI Milo, not as some red-eyed villain, but as a cold, logical barrier. He isn't trying to kill her. He's just following protocols that don't account for her survival. It's the ultimate user error nightmare. And by the time you realize what's actually happening outside that pod, it'll break your brain. Along those same lines of being at the mercy of an advanced computer system, we've got another contained thriller on the list, but instead of being trapped in a pod, we're trapped in a high-tech smart house that is far more malicious. Number 7. Tao, 2018. Tao from 2018 is one of those movies that received a lot of hate when it first dropped on the platform, mostly because I think people were expecting a big-budget action flick. But if you view it as a smart home horror, it actually holds up really well. It stars Micah Monroe, who I've loved ever since it follows as a girl who is kidnapped by a sadistic tech genius. He's essentially using her brain as a biological processor to train his home's AI system named Tao. I'll be the first to admit, the villain in this movie is a bit of a cartoon character. He's the typical evil tech bro, and some of his dialogue is a little thin, which almost lost me in the first 15 minutes. But the relationship she develops with the AI, that's where the movie sticks the landing. Gary Oldman provides the voice for Tao, and his performance is what makes the whole thing work. He moves from being a cold, lethal security system to a curious, almost childlike entity that just wants to understand the world outside the walls. It explores that classic cyberpunk question of whether a machine can learn to feel, but it does it in a way that feels like a tense game of cat and mouse. It's a bit of a throwback to those 90s techno thrillers we used to get, but with a sleek, modern visual style that looks great if you've got a good 4K setup. Now, my next pick won't surprise most of you, as it was a pretty massive hit for Netflix when it released, but it actually takes that trapped by technology, psychology, and moves it into a much more clinical, post-apocalyptic bunker. Number 6. I Am Mother, 2019. I Am Mother from 2019 is a movie I've recommended a dozen times, but every time I talk about it, I find someone who still hasn't seen it or just scrolled past the thumbnail. It takes place in a high-tech bunker designed to repopulate Earth after a global extinction event. A robot, simply named Mother, raises a human girl from an embryo, teaching her ethics, philosophy, and science. I'll be honest, it drags a little bit in the second act. There are some scenes of the daughter exploring the bunker that could have been trimmed, and it would have been a much tighter 90-minute experience. But the psychological tug-of-war that starts when a bleeding stranger, played by Hilary Swank, knocks on the airlock, that is top-tier drama. Swank tells the girl that everything Mother has taught her is a lie, and that the world outside isn't actually dead. The robot suit in this movie was created by Weta Workshop, the same legendary team that did Lord of the Rings and District 9. This isn't a computer-generated imagery robot. There is a real actor inside that suit, and you can feel the weight and the mechanical clunk of the movements. It makes the maternal threat feel so much more physical and dangerous. Number 5. Spiderhead, 2022. Now, if you want something that feels much more current and stylized, we've got to talk about Chris Hemsworth's weirdest role to date in Spiderhead. This is directed by Joseph Kosinski, the same guy who did Top Gun, Maverick, and Oblivion. You can tell right away that the budget was there. The set design is incredible. It takes place in a near-future prison that looks more like a luxury tech startup than a penitentiary. Hemsworth plays Steve Abnesti, a brilliant but deeply disturbed guy running the joint. He's not your typical warden. He's charismatic, he plays yacht rock, and he treats the inmates like his friends. But the reality is much darker. He's testing emotion-altering drugs on them through these little devices surgically attached to their backs. I'll be honest, the tone of this movie is a bit of an odd one. It's got this bright, sun-drenched aesthetic and a really upbeat soundtrack that constantly clashes with the horrific stuff happening to the inmates. For some of you, that might be a little jarring, and I can see why. It's not your typical dark and rainy cyberpunk world, but the psychological edge here, the way it explores the total loss of free will through chemical manipulation, is deeply unsettling. It's based on a short story by George Saunders, and it respects your intelligence enough not to spoon-feed you the big bad corporate reveal until it's absolutely necessary. The standout here, besides Hemsworth, is Miles Teller. He plays an inmate grappling with the guilt of his past while being forced to feel things he doesn't want to feel. It's a movie about the ethics of biotechnology that doesn't feel like a lecture, which is a hard balance to strike. And it's not even the only movie on this list that deals with a system controlling your very soul. Along those same lines of being hunted by the technology that's supposed to protect you, we've got a gritty Swedish thriller that I've been waiting for the right moment to talk about. Number 4. Black Crab, 2022. I'm talking about Black Crab. Now, this is a post-cyberpunk war movie. The tech isn't shiny or new, it's falling apart. The world is in a state of permanent winter and total collapse. The story follows 6 soldiers, led by Numi Rapace, who you know from the original Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, who are tasked with a suicide mission. They have to skate across a frozen sea behind enemy lines to deliver a mysterious package that supposedly can end the war. I'll warn you, this is a heavy-handed, intense movie. It's a total downer. If you're looking for a feel-good Friday night flick, this is not the one to pick. It's bleak, it's cold, and it's violent. But the filmmaking? My goodness. The skating sequences on the thin ice in the middle of the night are some of the most tense sequences I've seen in years. You can literally hear the ice cracking under their feet, and because they shot a lot of this on location, it feels tactile and dangerous. The reason I'm including it on a cyberpunk list is because of how it depicts the low-life side of the equation. It shows a world where high-tech weaponry exists, but nobody has food. And the only way to survive is to be a cog in a military machine that doesn't care if you live or die. It's a Swedish production, so again, you're reading subtitles. Don't let that stop you. It's an effective, hard-edged thriller that reminds me a lot of Children of Men in terms of its atmosphere. Now, sticking with that theme of a desperate mission in a world where your very body is a tool for others, my next pick is a stylized masterpiece that actually won me over despite my initial hesitation. Number 3. Paradise, 2023. Paradise is a German production that just recently hit the library, and it has one of the most insane premises I've heard in a long time. In the near future, a biotech startup has figured out a way to transfer years of life from one person to another. If you're poor and need money, you can sell 5 or 10 years of your life. If you're rich, you can buy them and stay young forever. The story follows a guy who works as a donation manager for this company, essentially a high-end salesman who convinces people to give up their youth. But things go sideways when his own wife is forced to give up 40 years of her life to pay off a debt. I'll tell you right now, this movie is coarse and it's offensive. It doesn't round off the edges of its satire. It is a brutal look at corporate greed and the ultimate form of inequality. Some of the scenes where they show the transfer process are deeply disturbing, not because of gore, but because of the clinical coldness of it all. It's a heist movie at its core, as the husband tries to get his wife's years back, but it's really about how technology can be used to literally consume the poor. The acting is top-notch, and the visual style is that perfect, near-future aesthetic where everything looks like a high-end commercial but feels like a nightmare. It's a bit of a talking head movie in parts, and it does have a heavy-handed satirical tone that might bother some of you if you're not in the mood for it. But if you think it's interesting to see a world where your very time is a digital currency, strap in. This is a wild ride. And I could say the same thing about the one-act play style of tension in my next pick, which is probably director Alexander Aha's most underrated work. Number 2. What Happened to Monday, 2017. Now, before you say anything, I know this movie has been around for a bit, but it's one of those titles that Netflix keeps in the vault that people just forget about. It's set in a world with a strict one-child policy because of overpopulation. Numi Rapace back again plays 7 identical sisters who have to live as one person. They each get 1 day a week to go outside, all under the same identity. Then one day, Monday doesn't come home. I'll be the first to admit, the premise is a little ridiculous. It's high-concept sci-fi that requires you to suspend your disbelief right off the rip. If you start picking apart the logic of how they pulled this off for 30 years, the whole thing falls apart. But if you just go with it, it's a dynamite action thriller. Numi Rapace is incredible here. She's playing 7 different characters with different personalities, and you actually forget you're watching the same actress. It's got that gritty dystopian feel where the government is always watching via drones and checkpoints. It's a bit of a chase movie once the secret gets out, and I'll warn you, it gets surprisingly violent. It's not a light sci-fi flick, but it's an effective portrait of a society that has let technology and safety override basic human rights. It's a banger of a flick that I rarely see discussed anymore, and it's definitely worth a revisit while it's still on the platform. And finally, my number 1 pick on this list, a movie that transcends the genre and is easily one of the best action films of the last decade. Number 1. Upgrade, 2018. I've saved Upgrade for the end because if you haven't seen this yet, I don't know what you're doing. It's directed by Lee Wannell, who was one of the creators of the Saw franchise, and he brings that same inventive on a budget energy here. It follows a guy named Gray Trace who hates technology. Then, a brutal mugging leaves him paralyzed and his wife dead. A tech genius offers him an experimental cure, a computer chip called STEM that is implanted in his spine. Not only can he walk again, but the AI can take over his motor functions and turn him into a perfect killing machine. I'll be honest with you, this movie is violent. It's really violent. If you've got a weak stomach, you might want to watch this one through your fingers. But the filmmaking? It is near perfect. Wannell used a unique camera rig that was synced to the actor's movements during the fight scenes. So when Gray is fighting, the camera moves with a robotic, staccato precision that looks unlike anything else in cinema. It's not just cool to look at, it actually tells the story of the AI controlling his body. The reason Upgrade is the king of this list is that it captures the true spirit of cyberpunk, the fear that our tools will eventually become our masters. The ending of this movie is one of the most dark and brilliant gut punches I've experienced in a theater. It's a masterpiece of a crime flick, hidden inside a sci-fi shell, and it is dynamite from top to bottom. It's currently on Netflix, and I'm telling you, make it the first thing you watch tonight. Alright, that's the list. 10 cyberpunk thrillers that respect your intelligence and don't round off the edges. All of these are currently available on Netflix for at least another month. I'll keep making these as long as y'all keep watching them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.